Okay, so this is recording now in case the information is good for Jerry and Brenda to know related to the pursuit of that property. So go ahead, sorry.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, no, apparently he was in Harare. He didn't tell anybody that he was coming. He only phoned me the night before he left. And I think he had been to the property at Oasis and found out a few things. I think he was aware that we had begun moves to get the property consolidated and changed. But his main point was the foundations on which they have put up the walls. What he said was, and they were not strong enough to hold up a church roof. Because that was a slab, you remember, the tent was sitting on that slab. And he said that slab was primarily meant for the tent and would need to be reinforced if it was to hold up walls and certainly hold up a roof. So he said he phoned me because he was aware that we were making an effort to raise funds for the roof. And he was phoning me to warn that with most. Pardon?
I haven't heard the last 30 seconds. It's kind of, so I just keep talking and I'll see if I pick up what you're saying.
Okay. Yeah. No, I was saying that that the foundations may not be strong enough to hold up the roof, particularly if we decide to put a roof on that building. He says there is need for reinforcements or maybe to put pillars to hold up the roof. When I checked with Moses claims that they did put the reinforcements in the foundations and that the engineers had actually given permission for them to build on that foundation. So maybe when I do travel up to Harare, I might need to find the engineer's report and actually verify what the situation is. But if Emmanuel is, what Emmanuel said is true, then it will be pointless to actually put a roof on the building because, as he says, it may not hold up a roof, but it's something that is still subject to us investigating and maybe getting an engineer's report on that. So he then asked me a question as to why we were going ahead with one change the ownership. So I did tell him that the condition for us as ACOP to put a roof on there is that the property needs to be in the name of ACOP. So he was quite emphatic about it and that it must not change. It must remain as Oasis of Grace and that it must not change. He said that he had raised money, not just from ACOP, but from different other sources as well. And that had bought into the vision of Oasis. And therefore he owed it to the people that had contributed money for the purchase of that land to keep it in the name of Oasis. But he was very adamant and that we must not change the ownership. So I asked him to put all that in writing so that if we have to follow it up, at least we can then have a back and forth kind of discussion maybe with him and just to try and understand what the reasoning is. He hasn't yet done that, but I did ask him to put all things in writing so that we know where we stand as far as that property is concerned. So as soon as we're able to meet, my thinking was maybe when I do travel up to Harare, I will call for our national executive meeting at which we will table that issue and discuss it at great length and possibly come up with decision as to the way forward. But it does seem to be quite a complicated issue now. And I'm not sure what the rest of the guys are going to recommend, but yeah, it does seem to be a bit tricky.
So Henry, who likes to tell me things, said that part of the conversation was that the funds that was raised, and that Brian Cooper was very much the middleman, and it was definitely not ACOP. But was your understanding was that, like, all so far we've been able to find was the Calgary Full Gospel statement of, I forget what it was, 147 or 143. But is your understanding is that these other donations went through the Calgary church, or are they totally separate from Brian Cooper and the Calgary church?
Like they were totally separate from the Calgary church. Because he mentioned, I remember him mentioning Australia, that some of the funding came from Australia, some of the funding came from the United States, and yes, some of the funding came from the downtown Calgary church. So I don't know in terms of the ratios of the monies, you know, from the different sources.
Do you think he will give you that in writing?
I hope so. I really hope he will be able to do that, because if we have to be in the clear and in the picture of what actually happened and what the situation is, I personally think that he owes it to us to tell us exactly what the situation is.
Yeah, because.
But what I also found kind of really funny and strange is that now Moses is the pastor at that church, but Moses didn't know that Emmanuel was in town until I phoned him and asked him about it. Until after Emmanuel had left and gone back to the United States. Apparently nobody in Harare knew, not even Henry knew that Emmanuel was in town. He just came in under the radar and stayed under the radar until, you know, the day before he left when he phoned me.
So, like, looking at it, for me at first is, we know the Calgary church put, if they're separate groups, it wouldn't have needed much more money than what Calgary gave, would it? Like 140?
No, it wouldn't. Yeah, I mean, that was quite a substantial sum of money. I don't think it would have needed much more money. So maybe these other groups didn't put as much as the Calgary church did.
And what would be your sense? I don't mean that you know for sure, but what would be your sense of whether Emmanuel actually still has a vision for an Oasis of Grace, or is he just trying to stay close to the money?
It sounds like he still has a vision for an Oasis of Grace. From the way that, well, from how he sounded, it's like he still sees himself someday in future, maybe coming back and perhaps taking over the leadership of that church. I don't know. I doubt that it has to do with the money. I doubt that he intends selling any of that land. I think certainly he does want to buy a portion of it. And there is another empty lot next to where they've built the, where they've put up the building. I understand that he has actually made suggestions that he would like to purchase that one for himself. But I don't think he would sell all of the church property. He might want to sell part of it as he did before. But it does sound like he still maybe sees himself someday in future, maybe coming back to carry on with that work. I don't know.
So,
and I don't know.
I was going to ask, So if he's not talking to Moses, he's obviously talking to somebody, but that's a pretty small group now, is it? Has he got, who, what's your guess at whose ear he has?
Well, it looks like there's a team of elders there. And he has managed to divide Moses and the team of elders. So he deals with the elders and leaves Moses out of the picture. And those elders are the ones that have been feeding him with information, apparently. And they knew about his presence and they were there with him. So I really don't know even the future of Moses at that church, given the scenario. Because now it will end up being a wrangle, a tussle for leadership between him and between Moses and Emmanuel, as far as I see it now.
So 2 years ago or so, Betty interjected to warn us that this was going to happen, and she seemed to have some favor there as well. Do you see that as being in play?
As I really don't know where she stands now, but I don't think she now has any interests in that property or in the church. I don't think so. But certainly maybe at Musana, maybe she still has some interest there. But at the Oasis of Grace in town, it does appear, she has kind of let go of that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you talk with your leadership. I just recorded this so that I could make sure that Jerry and Brenda heard what we talked about, and they will,
Yes.
Obviously the condition of that property being ACOP still
Yes.
the condition, but they had been leaning, and I'm keeping this recorded in case I'm misunderstanding them. They can correct me. I had, there had been some thought that even instead of the roof, our financial help might go to your lawyer costs.
Yes.
And I guess the judgment we'd be looking from you is if this turns into a dispute, if you wanted to proceed and this turned into a dispute, in Canada, that would mean that the lawyer fees would multiply. Is that probably the case as well?
Yeah. Yeah. But what I think he might also have done is when he was in Harare, he must have gone to the original owner of that property because the title deeds are still with him. And I think he must have gone to him and made sure that no one has access to that. So, because he did say to me that that person, it's a guy named Philip, he did mention that Philip will not surrender the title deeds to anyone if he's not involved. So I think he must have gone there and made sure that we have no access even to the papers. So like we are saying, yes, I mean, if the lawyer then finds that it's that, and then it has to be litigation and all sorts of things, then obviously the lawyer costs are going to go up. But anyway, we'll hear what our national executive suggests, whether it's something that's worth pursuing or it's something that we need to just abandon. I don't know. We'll hear what the rest of the guys.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm sorry about this all, but I guess it was predictable. And
yes,
you guys will just have to figure out where you think you stand.
Yeah.
Okay, well, sorry for all of that. I'm going to turn off the recording now. We can keep talking, but I will just pause the recording.